the Flute New Music Consortium. I am Melissa Huempfer, member of FNMC, and today I have with me special guest Asha Srinivasan, who will be talking to us about her piece, Dviraag, that won the 2014 composition competition. Asha is the Associate Professor of Music at Lawrence University here in Appleton, Wisconsin, where she teaches theory, composition, and electronic music. So thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
I guess first off, tell us a little bit about yourself and when you first began composing.
Sure. Well, I've started composing when I was in high school, actually. When you do those music theory exercises, those part writing exercises, I actually had a class in that in high school. And so I started composing really by doing my assignments as I'm supposed to, and then I would go home and I would mess around with the harmonies. And so I actually started by writing choral music without any words because it was just 4 parts. And I was really interested even back then, and I think this is true today too, in just sonorities, sounds, and how to manipulate them and play with them, toy with them. And so then I went to college at Goucher College in Baltimore, and decided to study music there, and then pursued my composition studies further at Peabody Conservatory and University of Maryland in College Park.
Great, wonderful. And what inspires you as a composer?
Yeah, I find inspiration in lots of places, but actually music inspires me to make music. When I really think about my pieces and how I construct them and work with them, as I mentioned even early on, just, having a certain harmony can be inspirational if it invokes a certain mood or image or emotion. I like hearing other people's music and thinking, oh, I wonder how they did that, or I wonder what that sounds like if I would, work with this. So a lot of my inspiration actually comes from other music. And certainly I'm inspired by nature and other artistic disciplines, such as visual art and theater. But yeah, so those are some things that inspire me.
Okay. And tell us how you came to compose Dviraag.
This piece was a commission through another consortium, actually, a Flute and Cello consortium, and it was they had put out a national call for scores, and so just like I would for any festival or competition, I just sent my music out there, and I was happy that they selected me based on music I had already written. This was based on the piece Alone Dancing and Bapu, 2 of my other pieces that have flute, and so they seemed to like the sort of lyricality in those pieces. And this was for a group of 4 duos that were trying to have more new music for flute and cello. So the combination actually came to me through the commission. They wanted me to write a new piece, and they also wanted me to write something that had an Indian influence. They knew that was part of what I've been working on. So that's kind of how I started composing this piece.
Okay. Yeah, and tell us a little bit about the compositional process of your music, and I guess about the piece as well.
Sure. Well, I start in general with some kind of musical idea. Well, I just play to find ideas just in my mind, and maybe on the piano or singing. And then I really think about that idea quite a lot. So there's a lot that goes up, conceptual work that goes on, and then I'm improvising with that idea just to see if this is viable, or does it hold my interest for very long, and what else can I do with this? If I were to develop this idea into a piece, I start thinking about what the piece might be like. So that's kind of the compositional process. Then I get down to actually trying to realize my concept. And with Dviraag, one of the things that I had been interested in is working with the Indian modality. Indian music is very, very well known for a very rich modal melodic structure. And I consider myself an amateur when it comes to Indian music. I studied when I was very young. I actually lived in India until I was about 8, 9. And so I studied Indian music there. But then I dropped those when I came to the U.S. I got interested in the music here. Dviraag was part of that early process where I was returning to my roots of Indian music. And so I wanted to create a piece where I kind of invented my own mode using some of the modes that I was fond of in Indian music. And so the title of the piece, Dviraag, actually means two rags. Dvi is a Sanskrit prefix, kind of like our prefix bi, like bi hyphen. So like a dual mode. Raga is kind of like mode. And so there are actually two pentatonic modes that are complementary. That is to say, kind of like, you know how minor and major are complementary? Mm-hmm. In that sense, these two modes complement one another. And then I put that together in the system. So that was sort of the starting point with this particular piece. That helped give me a lot of inspiration, because I could do this with the melodic lines, or I could alternate between the instruments, between these two ragas and these two modes and things like that. So that's kind of how I started with that piece.
Yeah. Interesting. And then how did you come to pair it for flute and cello? What appealed to you about those two instruments?
Well, as I mentioned, that was coming from the commission, so there was a certain sense of, okay, this is what I needed to write for. But that being said, I really love the combination. They're both, for me, flute and cello are both very agile instruments. They're also very singing instruments. Do you know what I mean? I think because voice is primarily how I realize music, so thinking about both of those instruments from that perspective was very helpful. The fact that, you know, the cello can really cover that low range, and then flute has got that high range. They really work well together from that perspective. And they have the contrast of the wind and the string. So I actually didn't know all of this until I started working on the piece and discovering this duo, listening to other people's. There are a few other flute and cello pieces, so listening to that, and then also just exploring the two, how the two would interact.
In your piece, Dviraag, you mention in your notes about this musical exercise that you've incorporated. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. As I mentioned in the piece, the harmonic sound world for the piece is inspired by these two modes. But in terms of the motivic idea or the thematic material, I was thinking about what I wanted to do with this piece, and I had always wanted to do something with this Carnatic vocal exercise that I learned as a maybe, 5 or 6 year old probably, in India. It's one of the vocal exercises you learn early on in order to improve your vocal agility when you're studying, and also to improve your understanding of that particular mode and rhythm, really. So it's kind of like a solfege exercise, right? Okay. But this particular one was one of the more advanced ones, and it was really intricate. And I had always loved this exercise because of its rhythmic intricacy. The syncopation and the way it dealt with phrase structure. I never thought about it so concretely when I was young, but when I was thinking about that particular exercise and with this piece, I felt that these instruments could really bring that out really nicely, and it seemed like a good, that was an inspiration for this piece. So you'll first hear that exercise in the cello part, right at the beginning. After the flute's kind of fanfare opening, the cello just digs into this vocal exercise, and then the flute takes over. And then the rest of the piece really is derived in a lot of ways from the rhythmic and melodic content of that.
Okay, wonderful. And what advice can you give to performers when approaching this piece? I know you have some great notes in the beginning of the piece, so but can you add to that, like as a performer, what advice could you give us about performing the piece and connecting to the audience?
Well, I love working with performers, and I love to hear what people do with a piece of mine, their interpretation. So first thing I would say is feel free to make it your own. And the thing about this piece is, which is actually pretty similar to most of my music probably, is it's in a sort of dramatic style. It has the big moments, it has the soft moments, it has the rhythmic drive at the end. There's a really pretty big finale at the end. So I think of the flute and cello as kind of two characters who are, maybe two soloists really, who are working together in this drama. So that would be one thing I would say, is just to go for it with the dramatic content. I really hoped that I achieved this, but I was really trying to showcase both instruments at their best and have them come together. So there's a lot of playfulness in between, so I would say, performers should probably kind of consider that, right, and the interaction, and share that with the audience, this sort of dueling. Sometimes it's competitive, but sometimes, it's very, very complementary. So yeah, in a sense, the piece is constructed in a sort of fast, slow, fast kind of structure. The slow movement is supposed to be just very meditative and really very intimate.
Okay.
So that might be helpful, but then the cello takes us out of that and just drives the piece to a big finish with a lot of energy.
Great. Do you have any current plans of composing more music for flute?
Well, I love the flute. As you know, I already have quite a bit of music for flute. And actually, I'm going to have a piece premiered, a new piece for flute and piano premiered at the National Flute Convention that's happening in August.
Oh, great.
Later this year. So that's a new piece that I wrote last year. And I'm probably going to be writing, this is loosely in the works, a work for my colleague here at Lawrence, Erin Lesser, and we're talking about writing something for low flutes, maybe bass flute, or she even has a contrabass flute. So we might explore some of the lower end of flute.
Great, wonderful. And I guess lastly, what is your experience with entrepreneurship, or what advice can you give to upcoming students?
Well, I can only give advice based on my own experience, and what I'd say is that an entrepreneur, I think it's a lot about the vision that they have for what it is that they want to bring. And I would say for me, the internet has been incredibly valuable to make connections. If you were to go to my website, you'll see all of my works, and you'll have you can listen to them, you can read a little bit about me, you can even purchase scores there. So that's kind of been the portal for me to be able to share my music with the world. I also have a SoundCloud page, for example, so having multiple media that you can put out, especially I think you were saying earlier to me, like people who aren't local, you can access people who are in all parts of the country or the world. So that has been a major access point for me.
Right.
So that would be something I would say everybody really should start doing early on, is to develop their personality, their web presence, essentially.
Okay, great advice, wonderful. Well, for more information about Asha and her music, you can go to twocomposers.org. And for more information about the Flute New Music Consortium, you can go to flutenewmusicconsortium.com. And we have our 2015 composition competition information already posted. So we hope you can check that out. And I would just like to say thank you so much for this interview and being able to give us a little inside look into your piece. And we're very happy to have had you. Yeah, and thank you for joining us.